everyone, welcome back for another MarketMooo. So Jurgen, you were in the States a little while ago.
Yep, bought a cowboy hat. Finally.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's a shame you're not wearing it, but maybe next time.
It crossed my mind.
Was there anything you want to share from your trip there?
I think the two major topics were, well, the strong milk production currently still in the US. So they have a record herd, at least the number hasn't been this high since the past 30 years or something.
Okay.
So really strong herd. There's still the incentive to have milk production growth. And the expectation is that the US can continue to grow, even though they had a great year last year. So that's compounding growth, and that's quite impressive. And the other topic, of course, was the high protein demand. And we have the whole volatility in the non-fat dry milk market in the US as well on top of that. But that has been a thing of the past, well, by now 5 months. And is infested with product recalls, short coverings, low production, low stocks, and a lot of things going on. So people are uncertain about how to regard the whole volatility there, I guess. It's a bit of everything, so that makes it difficult to grasp.
Yeah, and if we zoom into that, the high protein demand, are prices still moving up? Because in Europe they came down slightly, right?
Yeah, and that has been part of the debate, perhaps, because we saw prices rising a lot because production facility was running behind the high protein demand. But eventually, producers of those products have to calculate the actual price towards the customer. And what happens with demand in those cases? That was still the question mark. Because we went beyond the past peak, the past high of a few years ago, and so people start to question, hey, what's the new high, and should prices move down? And on top of that, I think a lot of these smaller players in that business perhaps find it difficult to actually the forward payment of the WPCA, the WPI, and then you'll receive your money a few months later. So you have to cover
cash flow issues for smaller companies.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah. So there's the expectation is that the high protein demand is here to stay, at least for the time being. I mean, there's Ozempic, there's the positive image of the protein and stuff like that. It's shifting slightly towards MPCs, because it's cheaper and still has protein value if applicable. It's not 100% coverable product.
Yeah, and like we said, less common probably in the sports industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're so used to having whey proteins on their packaging.
And whey protein is a great product, but some of that could be covered by MPCs, by milk proteins. But you are seeing some cracks here and there perhaps as well. And in the US, that also was based on the stock report, the storage report, where you saw an increase in storage. Exports have been behind for 6-7 months now, year on year, because it was getting expensive. But the domestic utilization, the domestic use in the US, and the same can be said about Europe, was still really strong. So the lower exports didn't matter that much. But you are seeing a few, it's not as 100% bullish as it used to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for the high proteins, is there more production capacity coming online still?
Yeah, there's still, so that helps the shortages. And that took time to build. So some new production facilities are coming online, also in Europe, by the way.
Europe as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, then moving to Europe, I mean, the weather's great again, really, really warm in big parts of Europe. How is that affecting cows' milk production?
A lot. And I think that is and will be the topic perhaps of this week, coming weeks, the heat wave that went through Europe and is still, still great weather, even in the Netherlands. And we have some bias because, for example, France continued to be warm while the Netherlands eased a little bit in temperature. And France is also an important dairy region, of course. You can see all the weekly unofficial figures by now from the start of the last heat wave, the one in the end of June. For example, German milk production went from a cliff all the way down from plus 7% year over year to, I think the last number I saw over the weekend was minus 3.5%.
Yeah, massive impact.
Massive impact. And the same can be said about France. They already were slightly negative compared to the same weeks last year, but
now
also
they're really negative.
they're really negative.
Because in general, cows are affected when temperatures are over 25 approximately.
Yeah.
That's when they get stressed and produce less milk.
Yeah, and most cows can fight shade. Mm-hmm. So you go inside as a cow and you have the freedom to do so in most cases, or you're already inside. Mm-hmm. And it's a ventilated space. So it's not that, hey, temperature hits 25 degrees outside, the cow is in trouble. It doesn't work that way, because a farmer, of course, can do his or her things to ease the cow a little bit. But when temperatures are 30 degrees or higher, or 35 even or higher, and the humidity level comes in play as well, because then it's a double whammy, and then the cow is affected. Because I've had a look at some of these cows during the heat wave, and all they do is like rest at best. Yeah. Some farmers are worried that cows could die even if it's really warm, especially the older cows. So that's a long-lasting effect. Mm-hmm. But the yield usually returns after 2-3 weeks past the heat wave event.
But then temperatures do have to really drop.
Yeah, they have to drop, and then it takes still a few weeks to get the yield back. Except when, and I base myself on science, of course. I read a few articles because that's a question that has been asked a lot. How long will it last forever? That negative impact of the heat wave, and most scientific articles said on average 2 weeks. That's an average. Except when the cow is in the last stage of pregnancy. Mm. I guess that's usually, March, April, the spring, not the summer.
And then the effect's bigger.
Then the effect lasts longer.
Yeah. Okay, but that will probably not be the case, because the heat wave is in the summer, right? So that's not to be expected.
Yeah.
Okay, but still quite some effect.
Still quite some impact. And when you look at the commodity production, for example, in Germany, it affects commodity production a lot as well. You saw negative numbers on butter production, quite strong, double digit, and the same for skimmed, almost double digit as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's on the short term. The heat wave has been a very bullish thing, actually.
Yeah.
When you zoom out, before the heat wave, Europe was still positive in its milk production year on year compared to last year. And for example, in butter, there still should be ample availability in stock. For example, S&P exports were strong, but production was also strong, and it was not as bullish as during the heat wave and right now. Yeah. Okay. So that's the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I mean, if we, go a bit more global, if we look at New Zealand, because they're starting to come into their season.
Yeah, correct.
Right? Do you have any figures, any input on that?
Spoke with a few colleagues in that area, in the APAC region, and their expectation is, hey, we had a really great last season. The 2025-2026 season was really good, green all over the place in terms of milk production. So that's hard to beat, and in their mind, it should be close to neutral, maybe even slightly negative, and it all depends on their major topic, which is El Nino. Mm-hmm. And they have an expectancy of El Nino, and it could be a strong El Nino, and that usually has a negative impact on milk production in New Zealand. Other than that, milk price should still be okay for farmers. The whole cow farm economics also still should be okay, but that El Nino worries them. And fertilizer cost could also be something I would watch, depending on all the volatility in the Persian Gulf, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So much going on in the world at the moment.
Yeah, because that changes every week, every day. And usually the energy prices are strongly correlated with fertilizer costs. So there you go. That's your wild card.
Yeah, something to watch, definitely. Yeah.
And those things, energy costs, fertilizer costs, can crush margins for farmers. So that's why I would watch it.
Yeah. And then on the demand side?
Yeah.
Anything newsworthy there?
For skimmed, we're still kind of expecting low demand from China. But we already discussed that in previous podcasts, and that's more or less unchanged. Southeast Asia, we were pretty positive. We're still positive, but also depends on the whole oil cost and energy cost, etc.
Yeah.
Because that might entice inflation over there. And then it's a problem for dairy demand, but overall still positive. Mexican demand, pretty neutral actually. Not expecting great numbers, not expecting really negative numbers either, assuming that the non-fat dry milk price remains as is, which is a bit lower than it has been.
Okay, yeah. And just one more thing on Europe, because we've seen the concentrate prices increase by a lot, probably because of the weather. Do you expect less S&P production? Because it doesn't calculate for a lot of producers to produce S&P from the concentrate?
That's a great question, and that's actually something I would watch as well in the future, because usually when you have the milk surplus, a lot of corporations produce their retail product, and that's including cheese, and they don't want to overproduce that, but they still want to fulfill the demand for cheese. So you have, if you have really strong production, you have a surplus, and that surplus is usually flown towards the commodities, being skimmed and butter in Europe. And when that milk production halts, that growth halts, then skimmed and butter are the ones that suffer the most as well. It's sort of a balancing thing. And so when you had a look at the weekly reports from Germany, the unofficial ones from last weekend, that's the production of 2 weeks ago, S&P and butter production were low because there was no longer a surplus. And that's what I would watch on the longer run as well, because you could have the expectancy that European, unlike the US, as discussed at the start of the podcast, Europe doesn't have compounding growth in milk production, or at least that's really difficult with all the lack of space and regulations in place. So by the end of the year, you might see negative numbers in Europe again compared to the really strong figures we saw at the end of last year. And then I expect S&P production and butter production to be less strong. But it's not a crystal ball. That's
that's what we did say that last year, that period, we had a strong European milk production, and we're expecting the level to be lower this year.
Yeah, and you also see that right now with the heat wave, where S&P and butter production are really low.
Yeah. All right, well then to finish this episode, what are a couple key things? I mean, we've mentioned a lot what's going on in the world and with dairy and in different regions. Are there a couple of key things you would like to mention to our viewers to watch out for?
Well, weather, of course, whether it's a heat wave in Europe or in the US, because that's also something you would want to watch, and El Nino on the midterm and the development of El Nino. Some diseases, screwworm in the US, I'm watching, and I'm always watching bird flu and blue tongue, stuff like that. Persian Gulf, those are your wild cards, although European heat wave is currently going on.
Yeah, but those are kind of the things that might affect the milk production.
Yeah. And then I would watch European milk production going forward. Will it really turn negative in Q4 as well? Because that might affect the commodity production. And of course, the high protein whey and perhaps MPC price and developments right there, because that has been very bullish, and will that continue, or do we actually see cracks there? Yeah,
and also what effect will that have on the sweet whey powder production?
Exactly,
because that's already becoming tighter, and I think also long term something for buyers and producers to keep an eye on. What's going to happen there? How many producers are going to switch to WPCs, WPIs, and how much whey powder is going to be left for the industry?
Yeah, that's a real valid comment. It's not just about the high protein market itself, but about the entire complex, why I would watch that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. Well, thanks, Jurgen, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.